These are the 2A notes on fraction, decimal, and percent conversion. First, let's start with how to change a fraction to a decimal. In order to do this, you're going to change the fraction to a decimal by using long division. Let's try this with the fraction 4/5. In order to change 4/5 into a decimal, we're going to take 4 and divide it by 5. So we'll set it up like this. We need to figure out how many times 5 goes into 4, which it doesn't. So we'll have to go into the decimal places. We're going to add a decimal point and a 0 because 4.0 equals the same thing as 4. Now we're going to see how many times 5 goes into 40. 5 goes into 40 8 times. So we'll place the 8 above the 0. Now we're going to multiply. 5 times 8 is 40. So we'll multiply and place the 40 under the 4.0. Right now we're just ignoring the decimal point. The next step is to subtract. 40 minus 40 equals 0. So now we know we're finished. The last step is to bring our decimal point up so that we can see our final answer. The fraction 4/5 is equal to 0.8. So now we've finished changing the fraction into a decimal. The next thing we're going to do is change a decimal into a percent. In order to change a decimal to a percent, you have to multiply the decimal by 100. That's the same thing as moving the decimal 2 places to the right. If we're starting with the decimal 0.8, all we need to do is take our decimal and move it 1, 2 places to the right. Now this is where our decimal is located. We are going to fill in that extra space with a 0 and then rewrite our number. We end up with the number 80 with a decimal behind it. That's the same thing as 80. So our final answer is 80%. The last thing we're going to do is learn how to change a percent into a fraction. You can change a percent to a fraction by first placing the percent over 100 and then simplifying the fraction. So if we are starting with 80%, the first thing we need to do is ignore our percent symbol and take the number 80 and put it as a fraction out of 100. This works because percent means out of 100, so 80% is the same thing as 80 out of 100. The last thing we need to do is actually simplify this fraction. We need to think of the GCF of 80 and 100. So what's the biggest number that goes into 80 and goes into 100? The GCF of 80 and 100 happens to be 20. If we take 80 divided by 20, we get 4. And 100 divided by 20 is 5. So the percent, 80%, is equal to the fraction 4/5. Let's go back to the first column and try changing the fraction 2/3 into a decimal. So the first thing we're going to do is divide 2 by 3. We'll set it up like this. We're trying to see how many times 3 fits into 2, which it doesn't, so we're going to add a decimal point and a 0. So now we'll try to see how many times 3 goes into 20. 3 goes into 20 6 times without going over, because 6 times 3 is 18. We'll write the 18 under the 20 and then subtract. 20 minus 18 is 2. Because we have a remainder, we're going to add another 0 and then bring it down. And we'll see how many times 3 goes into 20, which is again 6. We'll multiply 3 times 6 to get 18 and then subtract again. And we end up getting 2. We can see that this will go on and on and on forever. So instead of continuing, we are going to bring up our decimal and put a repeating bar over the 6. This means that the fraction 2/3 is equal to 0.6 repeating. Now let's try changing 0.6 repeating into a percent. Again, we're going to take the decimal and move it 2 places to the right. So we'll move it from here over 2 places. Now remember, that 0.6 was repeating, which means it goes on forever and ever and ever. So instead of filling in a 0, we're actually going to fill in a 6. When we rewrite our decimal as a percent, it's still repeating. So we'll have 66.6 repeating percent. Now let's try changing another percent into a fraction. We'll start with the percent 15%. Again, you'll take the number, which is 15, and put it out of 100. Now the only thing left is to reduce our fraction. We need to think of what number is the GCF of 15 and 100. So what number can we divide out of 15 and 100? The number 5 goes into both 15 and 100. 15 divided by 5 is 3, and 100 divided by 5 is 20. So 15% is equal to 3 out of 20. Turn to the back and read the cartoon. When will I use this? Then at the bottom, change all of the scores into decimals and compare them. When you're finished, bring your notes to the teacher to show you're finished and work on 2B. When you're finished with 2B, please bring them to the teacher to have your answers checked.